Hey everyone, welcome back to Kitsune Customs. Today we're going to be making Leisure Time by Mayberry Street. I'll be going step by step through each portion of the miniature so you can go from the box to the miniature right along with me. So let's get right into it. Before we get started, I'm going to go into a little bit about what this kit includes. This is another one of the 1/24th scale Mayberry Street miniatures. And this one just includes white glue. It doesn't come with as much as some of the bigger ones, but that's okay, we can fill in the gaps. I love the instructions that are included with these. They show you each symbol, what each symbol means in the instructions, and how to use the wood and other pieces. And it goes through every piece that comes with it and how everything works, which is just fantastic. I enjoy how Mayberry Street does their instructions. If you'd like a better detailed list of how I get my kits ready to film, or just for organizational purposes in general, check out the video in the description or in the link up above this video, and you can go check that out. And since it's been a while since I've organized this kit, I'm going to quickly go through it and just make sure I have everything from the outer frame, the outer casing, the sofa, the mural, the side table, the tea table, everything is included and organized. So let's get to the first part. First thing we're going to do is the tea table. Now, technically I know where everything is in this bag already, but I like organizing it and just making it more visual to know where all my pieces are, when I need them, and that nothing has been misplaced. After everything has been pulled off to the side, the first thing we're going to do is cut out the paper tabletop and get it glued on to the wood. Now when I glue on paper pieces like this, my favorite thing to use is, I think it's a paint scraper is what that technically is. And I like using Aleene's tacky glue, as you can see there. And I don't just dab glue around, press it on, and hope for the best. My favorite thing to do with these is to kind of spread it around with my finger, wipe that off, and then put the paper piece down and kind of scrape along the top of it with this paint scraper. And that seems to give me the best effect of getting things secured properly, and it's flat with no bubbles. So here I'm just lightly pressing it down with my hand. You can kind of see it bubbles a little bit on top, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So then I'll take the scraper and just smooth it down with the scraper. Just wipe off the edges, wipe off the scraper, do the other side, and you can kind of tell here I pressed a little too hard, so it created a few ridges. But honestly, it's so much flatter than it would have been, and the ridges aren't something, unless you're really paying attention, you can't really tell. Next, just to make everything flush, because sometimes the paper is just a little bit too big, even if you do cut it to size, I'll just take my X-Acto knife and just cut the extra paper off, make sure everything is flush. Next thing we're going to do is put the legs in. Now, the instructions actually give a really good diagram of how these legs should go in. I like using Beacon for mine, and I like putting it in this real tiny squeeze bottle. Shout out to my friends on Facebook who actually told me about these squeeze bottles from Amazon. I'll put a link to them in the description so you can try them out for yourself. They work really well with Beacon's 3-in-1 glue. And when you stick these legs in, all you really have to do is, yes, they are going in at an angle, but they're just popping out the sides of the table. You don't need to make them diagonal or anything like that. They just stick out the sides, and this will also make it fit in your miniature better as well. And we're going to let this sit for a little while, and the tea table is done. Next thing we're going to do is work on the little decorative pieces that sit on the tea table. I'm going to be honest and say these were actually pretty hard to get to stick together. It looks fairly simple. You just put down a little bead of glue and stick the clear part on, but honestly this part was pretty hard. As you can see, the glue really likes to stick to everything. It'll flip over on itself, and anytime I tried putting the tweezers down to hold it in place, it would grab onto the tweezers, try pulling it apart. So this actually took some time and effort to get to work correctly. While everything's drying, the next thing we're going to tackle is the side table. This was probably one of the more infuriating pieces of furniture I had to work on, because you're trying to get little pieces of wood to stand up straight and basically support themselves. So if you don't have the right glue, or if you're just doing this with, say, the glue that's included, which is like basic Elmer's glue, it's a lot harder to get it to stand correctly. So this is probably the best way I've found to get everything to work correctly, and I use beacons for this as well. Now I put down some glue in all 4 of the corners, and I'm just using the tweezers to get the tiny little long wood pieces to stand upright on here. This is going to be the most difficult part of this whole thing, is just getting these tiny little wood pieces to stand correctly without tipping them over. This probably took me a good 30 minutes alone, just getting these to stand correctly and also be straight. So I'm using a little leveling ruler block I have here. I got off of Amazon. I'll also link this in the description below. But this was the perfect thing for just trying to make sure while it's drying that these things were actually staying level. And after many times going back and forth, I finally was able to get at least 3 of them straight before I put the 4th on, because after having all 4 on, even my small fingers couldn't really fit in between to get the leveling done correctly without displacing another one. After those have finally dried, which can take a good while if you've been doing that moving around the whole time, the next step is to place tiny beads of glue on the other square and lay it on top. Again, this is the best way I found to do it. Laying the square on top of the 4 pegs really took a lot of work and a lot of rearranging, and it just got really messy. So laying these on top and then rearranging the sticks on top of the square just seemed to be easier for me, and I could adjust it a little bit easier. Mess around with it yourself, find what works best for you, but for me, this seemed to work pretty well. And there you have it. It's finally glued together. All you have to do is get the strings out. Beacons does leave some hot glue-like strings on it, but I will say in the end, beacons will last you 1,000 times longer than hot glue ever will. And that's generally why I discourage hot glue use as much as possible, just because it just doesn't stand the test of time. Next thing we're going to do is layer some glue on the top square piece, and we'll get that white tabletop put on. And kind of like when we were putting the frame together, laying something down on top instead of placing a heavy piece on top to glue down just seemed to be an easier way to get things to fit properly. And there you have it. There's the finished little modern side table. Next thing we're going to do for the side table is the plant that sits on it. Now, whenever you get these bags of flora type pieces, they're always going to send you a million times too much. You will probably never use all of this. As a matter of fact, you could probably save this bag of red flora and use it for almost any kit you do for the next 10 years. Unless you do something gigantic at a bigger scale, of course. But all you have to do is just snip off a few key pieces. I think I used 3 or 4 of this, and just trimmed the ends so it had more of a stick base so I could fit them into the bead vase a little bit easier. After choosing 3 nice pieces, I also like to trim this up as well, just so you're getting the leaves off and not having the long stem attached. So I'm going to cut off 2 different pieces because honestly, after 3 red stems and 2 little sets of leaves, it's hard to fit much else in a bead vase, to be honest. Next thing I'm going to do is just do some placement to see how I want this to look before I get the glue in there, and just kind of mess around with it and see what I like, see what's going to work properly. And next comes out the hot glue. Now this is an area I do like using hot glue, especially on a cut mat, because cut mats you can take off glue with alcohol or anything like that. But the best thing I've found is hot glue, especially when it's dumped all together like this, likes to stay hot and malleable for a little while. So it gives me the opportunity to kind of mold these pieces around, sit them in the glue while it's drying. One thing you want to watch out for, that bead is now going to be very hot, especially if it's a more metal-based bead like this one is. That bead is now very hot while I'm placing things around in it. So you want to keep the tweezers around, like you can see the tweezers are around this bead, just in case I need to grab it to hold it down. I won't be tempted to grab it with my fingers and possibly burn myself. Some of the leaf pieces didn't end up working, so I had to cut new ones. And you can see I'm kind of frantic here trying to do this as fast as I can because that glue is drying. So just trying to get as many things in there to look good as fast as I possibly can. Last thing to do when you're rearranging all this, to get it off the bottom, you're actually going to try letting it dry in place for a while, and after it's finished drying you can literally just scrape it off the bottom like this. Sometimes it'll leave a glue streak if it wasn't completely finished drying, but this will leave a flat bottom on your vase and it'll be full of glue, so it'll be now nice and weighted and it should sit properly pretty well. And there's the finished flower pot. Next thing we're going to do is work on the biggest piece in here, the sofa. First thing we're going to do, as always, is lay out every single piece so we can see much more visually where everything's going to go, where everything is needed, and what we need to do first. This is actually a great example of why I love these work mats. Mine came in blue. I have another one I got from Hobby Lobby that is orange. I can tag both of those in the description as well, but anytime things like to fall out and roll around, these rubbery silicone mats just make everything so much better, so you don't lose anything. Now the first thing we have to do with the green is get all the green cut out. Now this is something I've noticed can be really hard. I used to think that fabric, oh, that's just going to be so simple, but it can really be difficult getting everything cut correctly. So I use this double-sided fabric tape. I put tiny bits of it in areas that aren't needed necessarily, things that'll get thrown away. So I'm just taking off the backing of this double-sided tape, these tiny little squares I've cut out. You can see a portion of the fabric tape on the left side of the screen there. That was what I cut off the tiny pieces from. And then I'll just lay them down on the back side, not the velvety front side, but the back side of this green fabric, to where making sure that there is green everywhere for this to work properly. And I'll just kind of press down where I know those tape dots are. And you can kind of see where I was pressing are areas that will get cut off. And I like to use a rotary tool for this just so it's always flat and it lessens the chance of cutting incorrectly. But if you're more comfortable with scissors, then go right ahead and use them. But for my purposes, I kind of like using a rotary tool for these. And you always want to be careful when you're fully cutting things apart, because sometimes little pieces of fabric will snag, and all you have to do is go along and just get them split off before you continue. I had to press pretty hard when I was doing this because unfortunately I have a fairly cheap rotary tool. I would highly encourage a much more professional tool. Mine I got from Hobby Lobby. It was, again, one of the much cheaper ones, but it works for doing miniatures for me. I should probably replace the blade here fairly soon, as I've used it quite often. You can kind of see that from how hard I was having to press. And for the ends, I just end up picking it up and cutting it out. This, just doing the corners, is much easier with scissors than doing it with a rotary tool, because you can't really get in precise corners. I only really use the rotary tool for going straight through a piece of fabric, but if you're doing corners, getting a pair of good scissors, fabric scissors, or a pair of smaller scissors are perfect for this. And I always like to keep the piece of paper with it, so I know what's going to what when I need it when I'm putting the sofa together. Never throw those pieces of paper away right away at all. Next thing we're going to do is cut out some pieces of fabric from this white felt. These don't come with a pattern, so you kind of just have to measure and cut it out yourself based on what the instruction book tells you. And this is my favorite way to cut out felt, honestly. I just use a pencil and lay everything out with the ruler that's included in the kits. And I just use the side that has the pencil on it as the bottom, the part that will end up having glue on it. So you won't really end up seeing these pencil lines, but I would always beforehand, before you do this, look at the instructions, see if there's anything that might show in whatever piece of furniture that you're making. But if it doesn't look like it's going to show, then pencil is a great way to get these cut out. Again, using the rotary tool here because I'm going straight through the fabric just makes it so much simpler. And these are just turning into padding for the back of the couch, so they'll be stacked and placed on top of the wood piece. Next, we'll glue the felt onto the wood, and this doesn't have to be smoothed out, use the scraper or anything like that, because it's just felt, and felt kind of has its own cushioning, and you just need to get the glue onto there so it can adhere to it. Now, this next part I actually considered taking out, but I decided to leave it in because I feel like it's really important to see when mistakes happen and how you can fix them easily without it being too much of an issue. So now this is 3-6-2, and this one's actually accurate, so this first one's fine, nothing was wrong with this one, but moving forward it just kind of makes more of a better picture of why it's important to keep all the little pieces of paper along with your fabric. Now, I mentioned earlier you don't have to smooth out glue on felt, but the only reason I did do it here is because the glue is going directly onto the fabric, and I've learned from previous experience making this exact same kit before filming that if I don't smooth out the glue, even though it is on felt, the fabric showed it still. So it's still important to, whenever something is glue is adhering to fabric, you want to smooth out that glue as much as you can. Now, the reason I didn't do that here, having just said that, is because this part actually does not show. This is the underside of the couch, and you really need as much adherence to the wood as possible. So I had to hold this on for quite a while. Clamps are fantastic for this, and there you go, there's the clamps. But getting small clamps like this at a hardware store really are beneficial and let you take a break from holding an item in place and let you focus your attention elsewhere. I really enjoy using Aleene's tacky glue over, let's say, Beacon's 3-in-1 because Beacon's tends to bleed through fabric quite a bit. It's a much more liquidy glue, clear glue I would say, and Aleene's really is, it's like the better version of Elmer's glue, and fabric just seems to really take it and adhere to it much more. So I love using Aleene's for fabric. Like you saw there, it does take a second to stick, so those clamps really are key here, but once it's on and dried, it's on. Now you can see here, for some reason, there's a few spots, especially this velvety fabric, that just did not want to take the Aleene's. So after much deliberation and frustration, I finally resorted to using the hot glue gun. I really don't encourage this because it leaves such nasty, thick glue spots, because hot glue does not soak into anything. It just stays on the surface, so it leaves giant glue spots, and it can really bubble up your furniture when you're using it. So I really do advise against it, but if you're careful with it and you don't mind, you know, maybe singeing a fingertip or two to smooth out the hot glue, it really can work in a pinch. I did not use it for everything on this couch, but every once in a while the glue just refused to work, and I used that instead. Another big thing about these couches is sometimes you kind of have to think ahead for how the edges are going to lay. Is it going to overlap? Is it going to be gaps that are going to show? Now on this last piece, I got so frustrated, did not want to use the hot glue again, that I ended up resorting to Beacons. You can use this, especially, I did mention that it can bleed through fabric, and it does, but since this was the underside of a piece of furniture, I wasn't too concerned about it. You can kind of see it trying to bleed through the underside of the fabric right there, but the clamps, once again, since this is the bottom, it was okay to use for this part. This is the one I want to show you guys. I rushed it a little bit and accidentally did the wrong piece of fabric here. This part is okay. This is actually the piece of felt that was supposed to go on this wood, and that ended up fine. The next thing I did was grab 361, and this one is actually supposed to go on that bigger piece of wood you see over on the right hand side, but for some reason I decided to get kind of cocky and I thought I knew what I was doing, but I actually ended up picking the wrong piece of fabric, and you can kind of see it here. That one didn't have as much room on the ends, and this is where I'm realizing, oh shoot, I actually put it on the wrong piece of wood. So thankfully Aleene's was able to come off fairly easy when I ripped it, so even though it does have a pretty good adherence, you can take it off without hurting the fabric fairly easily. Now, it may be harder with the thinner fabrics. I can't speak to taking off fabric that's much thinner that comes with some of these kits. Thankfully, this more velvety fabric was easy to come off without ripping at the edges or anything like that, so it did come off well, and I think I did take the felt off of this one too. But as you can see, it did come off fairly easy. It didn't damage the fabric on the other side. And I put it with the piece of wood that was actually supposed to go to. Now I'm going to adhere that piece of wood to the fabric it was really supposed to go with. And I'll have that number up on the screen, that piece of paper number, the fabric number that's actually supposed to go on this piece of wood. I'll put that up on the screen. This is actually another great method for getting fabric to adhere to your glue, is just flipping it over so you don't have any fabric bubbles. And in the end with this, I started using beacons a lot more because since it was the back side of fabric that was not going to be seen, I ended up using that more, and the clamps really loved having beacons be used, so it made it a lot easier. Now you can kind of see I probably should have cut this fabric a little bit wider, more than the directions showed, because I ended up with some gaps, and generally you want to stay away from those. But sometimes it just can't be helped, and it generally still looks good. Now you can see 361 is the fabric that's supposed to be used with this large piece of wood. And here you can see how really stretching the fabric out and to get it to cover the corners actually worked pretty well. There's a couple corners that didn't get covered, so this was just a time for me to decide what was going to be the front part of the couch that would get seen and what part wasn't. And now we can actually put the feet on. Now we're going to work on the armrest pieces for the couch. And these are just going to be 2 pieces of fabric with some felt inside of them, and they'll get rolled over those little wood dowels in the right corner over there. And here's my little hack for measuring where you need to fold these things. So it needs to be the exact length of the dowel, so I just kind of lay it on there and know whether I need to change something or fold it in more, take it out some, and that gives me a better idea of the exact size it needs to be. Then I put the little fabric pieces on the end of the dowels, and after measuring it just a little bit more to make sure I've got it right, then we're going to start actually gluing these dowels in. I did use hot glue for this because it's already somewhat bubbled as an armrest end, and having this adhere correctly was really important for it to not fall apart because it was such tightly wound fabric, and ended up working out pretty well. You can kind of see there was a little bit of gap where the wood was, and I probably could have pushed it up just a smidge more, so it really is important as you're rolling to see where that fabric is going. So I decided that this would be, I believe that's the back part, but this is where I was kind of deciding once again what was going to be the front part of the couch. This is the bottom piece right here. And this will be the bottom cushion of the couch. Now, I know the directions show this pretty well, but you can also see here there has to be a little bit of a gap for the back of the couch to go on. This right here is the back piece. This is the part we kind of messed up on a little bit. And I actually didn't like how those other ends of this back piece look, so I flipped the back piece around. The way I have it sitting, it should be the other direction, but honestly, nobody's going to see the back. Nobody's going to know which direction you have it going. And I did use hot glue for this because, again, the hot glue is not really going to be seen, and it just makes everything sit so much faster. You could definitely use Beacon for this. You could even use Aleene's, but Aleene's I would say is more for paper and fabric alone. But when you have wood involved, either Beacon or hot glue really is the best for this, especially if you want to do it fast. But if you really want some longevity to your pieces, I still wrestle with using my hot glue gun because over time hot glue just absolutely falls apart, stops being sticky, and stops adhering things. It was more or less for the sake of the video and time's sake that I was using hot glue in this video. I would really encourage you guys to use Beacon or some other kind of quick adhesive glue that works well for you, that you enjoy using, that would be much better for the longevity of your miniatures. And I apologize for all the weird fade-ins and fade-outs in these. I'm still getting used to how my camera works and how I need to film these, but for the most part we got some really good shots out of this. And there's the finished couch. There's a couple things I would have done differently, but you can see me kind of squeezing in some parts that I didn't like here, but those armrests really do have to be flush with the edges because this miniature is so small. It won't fit inside the glass case if you don't have those armrests fully flush with the side of the couch. Next, we're going to work on the pillows. And the pillows have been one of the hardest things for me to get good at. And I've changed my method several times. I believe I do my method of pillows differently than the way the directions have it written. If you like doing pillows the way the instruction book has it written, feel free to do that, or you can always try my method as well. But to begin, I just like bringing in the edges and doing like a quick hem, if you will, with a hot glue gun. Again, Aleene's would probably be much more suited to this, but again, for time's sake and for the sake of the video, I used hot glue quite often, but I can guarantee you within 5 or 6 years' time that glue will start to deteriorate, and I'm probably going to be doing some quick fixes. This is just hemming the two edges real quick, so everything has a hemmed edge essentially. Now I just like to fold the fabric in on itself until the pillow is about the size that I was hoping for. This makes measuring how the pillow is supposed to look so much easier in my opinion. Just kind of measuring how it's going to look on the couch. And then I just glue that back piece together. Right now I'm just gluing the bottom part of the pillow together. This actually makes gluing that back seam a little bit easier because you're not finagling with trying to keep your hand off of the glue in the center. Now be aware, this is just for anyone who's thinking that hot glue is just perfectly safe. This is actually extremely hot, and my fingers have just become very dulled to hot glue over the years of using it. I wouldn't recommend putting your fingers directly on hot glue like I am, and this is just my disclaimer that it's not the smartest thing in the world, and I wouldn't let your kids do it this way, just to be honest. Now here I'm just opening up the pillow a little bit more to make sure that the glue didn't come too far in. We don't want to fully glued inside of our pillow. Now that we've got it opened up all the way that we want it to, I'm just pulling out the cotton padding that came with the kit, and I try to shove in as much as I possibly can. So I kind of twist it, turn it, and I like using the tweezers to really get it in there. It just stuffs it in so nicely. And I would really advise using, you can kind of see it here, blunt or rounded ended tweezers so you're not poking your way through the fabric. And then just stuff it in with the tweezers as much as you can, and then you can glue the inside and glue it shut. And since I learned my lesson the first time of trying to hold that closed, tweezers really are a better option here. So, like I said, when I was warning against younger kids or anyone who doesn't have a good pain tolerance on their fingertips from years and years of using hot glue, tweezers are a good option.
Hello?
And there's the first pillow. It came out nice and fluffy. I remember thinking about this later that I probably could have kept the glue on the edges to a minimum, and I tried doing that more on the second pillow here, and you can see it's a lot fluffier, a lot squishier, and there's not as much glue holding the pillow together. And then there's our finished couch. Now we're going to work on the outer frame since we have all the interior pieces done. So this will be the wall and the floor, the rug that sits on it, and we'll put it together in its little 3D frame. Now you can see here there is a painted edge and a non-painted edge of that wall. The non-painted edge that's on the bottom there on the left is the part that actually adheres to the base. So you'll want to take note of that when you're placing your wallpaper if there's a specific direction you want your wallpaper to go. Now right here I'm just kind of measuring it out, making sure I have it exactly the way I want it. Flipped it over, and I'm just spreading some alines all over the back of it before I kind of smooth it in with my finger. And whenever you're doing this, I know I've mentioned this before, but just keep a paper towel nearby, as that's the easiest and fastest way to get glue off of your hand and continue what you're doing without getting glue on the paper itself. It will try rolling up on you, just for the sheer fact that it's paper with glue on it, but this will give you a quick second to kind of make sure it's in the right spot, and then go ahead and use your paint scraper to get it on as best you can without any bubbles. Always, always, always make sure you get the glue off of your paint scraper before you roll it over the paper again, just because I've had so many accidents where I had glue just smear from that paint scraper onto my paper and it just looked terrible. And you can see I did get one spot right there and I just started moving too fast, but overall it stays pretty flat and it makes the paper adhere to the wood that much better. Now we're going to be doing the floor, same process, same technique. And unfortunately you can kind of see it on the left there, but something, I think a little bit of hard glue got underneath the wood paper. And right here is where I kind of noticed it, and that just would not come out for anything. So unfortunately that stayed in the miniature. I wasn't willing to pull up the paper at this point and make it look even worse, so it just ended up looking like a dent in the floor. And now I'm using some beacons so we can adhere the back wall to the floor. This will actually take a while to dry if you're using beacons, but beacons will last so much longer like I've mentioned before. So I'm just using my little block leveler here, wiping off the glue that came off the back just so it doesn't adhere to the leveler block, and just kind of holding it in place as long as I can. And eventually bringing in my triangle and just making sure that this thing really is straight up and down. You can see from the level there that it is centered and it is straight. Now we're going to work on the wall lamp. And before we start bending anything, I'm actually going to use my nylon pliers to straighten out this piece of wire, just because it makes it so much easier to bend in the direction you want it to go, and just have it look that much more professional if it's already straight. After measuring it and knowing exactly how much I need, I'm just going to use my wire cutter to snip it to the length that it asks for. Now I'm taking my bending pliers here, and I just kind of centered it on the ruler so I knew where I needed to bend it. Then I used the nylon pliers to push it together, because this is basically supposed to be a double wide wire folded in half. So here I'm just bending it together, which is much easier instead of doing it with my fingers. So having all these jewelry pliers available really has been perfect for miniatures. And there you have it, a perfectly folded in half piece of wire. Now we're going to adhere the top piece to the lamp bulb. And again, if you don't feel that dexterous, using a pair of tweezers or pliers or whatever you have laying around really is the perfect thing for miniature making if you don't think your fingers are going to be able to handle it. Next, we're going to bend the wire to a little over halfway. And I believe I ended up rebending this because this needed a 3-part bend, and I apologize for having some of this out of frame. I was bringing it closer to my face to see if I had done it right. But these, it really looks better with a more beveled turn instead of just a hard bend. So I ended up straightening it out and then doing what I call a 3-part bend, where I'm doing one part, going in the middle, doing it again, and then going a little bit further and doing it again. So it's a much more rounded bevel of a turn. It just looks so much nicer than a hard turn. Next, we're going to adhere the metal piece to the inside of the globe. And this one you actually want to watch out for, because at the end, after I had finished making this miniature, this globe actually fell off of the wire. So beacons may not be the best here, but it did adhere for at least the time of this video. But like I said, I did go back and fix it later. Now, I actually forgot to put these pictures up on the wall before I adhered it to the bottom floor piece. I would do this before you actually adhere the wall to the floor, but still doable even if you didn't. So I'm just smoothing a little bit of glue on here so that it doesn't bubble over the sides. This is another great reason why smoothing out your glue is better, because it won't come through to the picture. And then after adhering the couch and the side table, that's kind of where I decide where I want the pictures to go. And for right now, I just have the couch and side table just laying there. I haven't really adhered them yet, because I'm going to do that when it's facing upright, but this is perfect for getting the pictures in where I want them to go. Now we're going to find the spot where this wall piece is supposed to go. And this is where you can kind of see that the metal does want to pop out of the globe, but I was trying to go as fast as I could. And you can also kind of see this little bead that they give you to put the wire in does not fit. So instead of trying to figure something else out, I just pulled out my big girl drill and decided to make that opening in the metal bead a little bit bigger. And here I'm just kind of measuring the drill bit that would probably work best without destroying the bead. And I'm just holding it inside a pair of pliers, and I went ahead and drilled the hole in it. And now our wire will go through. And the instructions kind of give you an idea of where this wall piece can go, but it really is up to you where you want it to sit, lower, closer to the picture frame, or you can make it go higher, which is I think what I ended up doing. And now that we have all our wall pieces on, then we'll put the couch and the table in place. And this is where you can see our upside down couch piece really didn't matter too much because it is being completely adhered to the wall and you're honestly never going to see it. Something to think about when you're putting your miniatures together is what is actually going to be seen and where could I kind of fudge a little bit to make it easier on myself. Now we're putting the table in place. And gluing the pillows down so they don't move after we put the dust cover on.
Hello? Okay, that's the reason why.
Then we're going to put the planter down. Beacons actually worked fairly well, even though that was hot glue on the bottom, but the two glues seemed to work fairly well together when putting the flower pot on. And now we're going to place our little paper rug on the front here, and just trying to decide where it should go to make it look really good. Smoothing out the glue on this, as always, is a smart choice, but for this in particular, making sure there's no real excess, because when we spread this out, we don't want any glue popping out the sides because it'll be right on top of the wood floor. And I tried to smooth this as gently as possible. I did still have a little bit of glue fall out on the sides there, but thankfully it wasn't too much. Now we're going to do our little coffee table. And once again, using some beacons on the feet, which can be really hard with how spider webby it gets, but after pulling off the excess, then I can just place it down. Next, we'll set our difficult little decorations on the coffee table. And I'm dumping some hot glue into the inside of this so it sticks better. But like I said before, hot glue doesn't always like metal, and sure enough, this is the part that fell out later on after I'd already put it together and finished the video. So don't always trust your hot glue, everyone. And there's the finished scene without the dust jacket on it. Now we're going to work on the dust jacket. One thing I like to do before I start, just to give myself more of a fail-safe, is to number them based on what it shows in the instructions. That way I know what part goes on the top, what are the sides, and what is the front. And you can see from the instructions exactly how it's supposed to go on, and they want you to tape it together beforehand. I've tried this, it doesn't work, it leaves nasty tape marks. And honestly, right there, I was just surprised at how cleanly that pulled off, because generally these do not pull off clean. So what I like to do is just pull off the paper tape stuff cover and then just put it directly onto the miniature, letting each piece dry onto it before I continue. And even though this isn't the prettiest look, honestly, this is the best I've ever done at a dust cover, just by gluing each of them on individually. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope you guys had as much fun as I did making this one today. I'm currently working my way through making every Mayberry Street miniature, so if you'd like to see more, hit like and subscribe to see which one I make next. Love you guys. See you in the next one. Bye.